All right, so let's go through some of the basic things about crime. This is kind of, our starting point. We want to all kind of speak the same language, just get some basic things in before we move on to more complicated stuff. First of all, why do we have laws? Well, the whole point of laws is to protect us from the actions of others, to regulate society. So basically, we can live a peaceful coexistence with our neighbors. And laws are simply just rules or regulations that are made both by government or made by government and then enforced by government to regulate the conduct of people. So when we say we have rules and regulations, we know what rules are. We have them in our classroom, we have them in our homes or whatever. But these are made by government, either the state government or the federal government, sometimes by the city government. Either way, they're created by government and then they're enforced by government. It is our state legislature that makes our state laws, and it is our state police that enforce those laws. It's our state courts that interpret those laws. And oftentimes those laws reflect and promote whatever standards society has. Laws are a reflection of society. So if people believe that it is wrong to smoke meth, then we have laws against methamphetamine. If we believe it's wrong for an adult to have sex with a minor, then we have laws against those things. People believe something is wrong, then our laws reflect those beliefs. Like I said before, the government makes the laws, but it's a little more complicated than that. We have two systems of government, or actually a better way to describe it is we have federalism. If you've been in a government class, you understand what federalism is. But federalism is the concept of sharing powers between the national government, which is our government made in Washington, D.C., with our U.S. Congress, our U.S. President, and so on, and the state governments. See, every single state has their own government. The state of South Dakota has a governor, we have a state legislature, and we have a state Supreme Court. And so does the state of Minnesota and Nebraska, and so on. So really we have 51 sets of laws in the United States because we have 51 governments. The U.S. government, which is supreme over the states, and then the state government. But actually, we think of federalism, it's not supreme. The federal government is supreme in their sphere, meaning they have some things that they can make laws on. But the states have the power to make laws on just about everything else. And that's important to understand because when we look at the criminal law aspect of it, most criminal laws are made by the states. So in South Dakota, you don't have to wear a seatbelt when you ride. You don't have to wear a helmet if you ride a motorcycle if you're over 18. But in the state of Minnesota, you do. In South Dakota, you can start driving with a permit at age 14. In a lot of other states, you cannot. South Dakota has the death penalty. Minnesota does not. Most of the laws that we have are similar. Like, you can't kill anybody in South Dakota and get away with it. It's illegal to kill somebody, and it's also illegal in every other state in the union. How we punish it may be different. Every state has a law against burglary, but one state may punish you by 10 years in prison, another one maybe 5 years. So we have a lot of similar laws, but every state writes their own laws. The federal laws are made in Washington, D.C., and they apply to everybody. Okay, so terrorism is a violation of the federal law. So if somebody commits a terrorist act in South Dakota, they'd be punished the same as if they committed a terrorist act in Wyoming or Nevada because they would fall under federal law. Most laws, however, like I said, are state laws. Laws that are made by the individual states that apply only to that particular state. So where things get a little complicated is sometimes we call things different things. Like one state may call, let's say, an individual punches another person. They may call that battery, where a different state may call that assault or aggravated assault or simple assault. We may have different names for the same action, but they may be called, like I said, they may be called different things. When it comes to interpreting those laws, well, if it's a violation of a South Dakota law, then you'll be tried in South Dakota under a South Dakota state court. And then you can appeal it to an appellate court within the state. South Dakota has our state Supreme Court. It's a violation of a federal law, let's say that terrorism or, smuggling drugs from one state to another, bank robbery, things like that. then that's a violation of federal law. You'd be tried in a federal court, this U.S. District Court, and you can appeal it to the courts of appeal. All things can end up in the U.S. Supreme Court, but we really don't deal a lot with appellate jurisdiction in this class. We deal more with original jurisdiction. And original jurisdiction, which I'll get to later, determines if somebody's guilty or innocent. The trials of original jurisdiction are trial courts. They determine if someone's guilty or innocent. Both federal and state law, federal and state law, both have original jurisdiction. And these are the ones that we see on TV often, where we have a judge and a jury and witnesses and so on. And a jury listens to the evidence presented, and they come back with a verdict, and it's either guilty or not guilty. We've seen these on TV before, crime shows and so on. But you may not be as familiar as appellate jurisdiction. If you want to appeal your conviction, you really can't appeal the conviction, but you can appeal a rule of law. Let's say you felt like you didn't have a fair jury, or that some of your constitutional rights were violated. You can appeal it, and really you're asking for a new trial. And this is what we call an appellate court, or a court with appellate jurisdiction. They just determine if you were given a fair trial, the way it was supposed to be handled. They don't have juries or witnesses because they don't determine guilt or innocence. Really what they're doing is trying to determine if you were given a fair trial. And if the answer is yes, then whatever the lower court's decision was, if the trial court found you guilty, then you're still guilty. If they rule no, that you weren't given a fair trial, doesn't mean you're innocent. It means that, I guess, you deserve a new trial. If you won your appeal, you don't appeal guilt or innocence. You appeal rules of law. This is what an appellate court looks like. This is at least an example. This here, you see, we have 5 spots where judges would sit. A little bit different. No jury box, no witness stand. They play a different role. A couple more definitions, and not really many. Crime, well, a crime is just an offense against the public good. You probably know this. You violated a criminal law. We call that a crime. And maybe what you don't know is there's 2 elements of the crime. One, the physical act. You can't be charged with a crime if you didn't actually do it. You can't be charged with murder if you didn't kill anybody. You can be charged with attempted murder, but you didn't commit the physical act of murder because the person's still alive. There's a difference between burglary and robbery. Burglary is if you break into a place and steal something or attempt to steal something. Robbery is if you take something from somebody's immediate presence by force. So if I take a knife to you and say, give me your wallet, I've robbed you. I haven't burgled you, I've robbed you. If I've broken into your house and stolen something from it, broke into your house and stole your computer, that's a burglary. I can't be charged with robbery if my physical act was actually burglary. Kind of self-explanatory, but sometimes we'll get into things like, can you prove this? Like premeditation. First-degree murder has to be premeditated. It means planned out in advance. In order to convict somebody of first-degree murder, you got to be able to prove that it was premeditated, that they actually committed the physical act of premeditation. Sometimes not easy to do. And we'll get into that more as the year goes on. The other aspect is the mental state. Now, for the most part, if you commit the physical act, you also have the mental state. But there are some circumstances where you may not. Young children, usually under the age of 10 or 8, depending on the state law, maybe don't understand the consequences of their action. So even though they committed the physical act, they may not be tried with a crime because they didn't have the mental state. Same thing goes with somebody who's found not guilty because of insanity. They committed the physical act, but they did not have the mental state to understand what that act was. Last couple things here. 2 types of crime. We have a felony, which is a serious crime. When we talk about crimes, it's either going to be a felony or a misdemeanor. Okay. A misdemeanor is a less serious crime. Now, felony are the ones that we hear about where people are going to prison. We're talking about the murders, the rapes, the manslaughter, the robberies, the burglaries, aggravated assaults, kidnapping, those kinds of crimes. Crimes that are serious crimes. Definition of a felony is a crime in which the possible punishment is more than a year in prison and more than $1,000 fine. A misdemeanor, those are less serious crimes. Most likely, you're going to commit some misdemeanors in your lifetime. A speeding ticket is a misdemeanor. Jaywalking would be a misdemeanor. Shoplifting, underage consumption, possession of a small amount of marijuana, a DUI, at least DUI 1 and DUI 2 are misdemeanors. A lot of crimes that are serious crimes, but they're not as serious as. Certainly, I wouldn't say that speeding is not serious, but murder is much more serious than speeding. Okay, the crimes that we punish the greatest are felonies. Chances are you're not going to commit a felony in your lifetime. Chances are you're going to commit misdemeanors in your lifetime. And let's just stop there for now.